Hey, you're watching Connected Digital World, and we're here to talk about the story of the Bureau, XCOM Declassified.
Hi, Andrew from Connected Digital World here. I recently visited 2K Marin Studios in San Francisco to take a look at the Bureau XCOM Declassified. While I was at the studio, I got to see a lot more of the game and also talk to various people who were involved in its creation. In this video, we interview Erik Caponi, who's the lead narrative designer on the Bureau XCOM Declassified. This is part one of a two-part interview. Enjoy. So, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us what you do?
No.
Thank you.
I'm Erik Caponi. I'm lead narrative designer on the Bureau, XCOM Declassified.
Great. So what exactly does that role encompass?
My team is in charge of all the story elements in the game, all of the writing, all of the cinematics, and all of the kind of in-game story moments. We write those, we generate the story both on a high and low level. Every word in the game is us up to the big arc of the story.
So the game's been in development now for a number of years. How much has the story changed from the early parts of the game we saw back in 2010?
I've been with this story a little over a year, and in the last year, pretty much since this expression of XCOM, this has been the story for it. The various versions have had their story. I mean, every game story will go through revision after revision and burn to the ground and built back up, and then we don't like that. Most of the changes it's gone through in this version of it have been tonal changes. When I got the story, the beat structure was there, and the skeleton of the story was there, and then we came in and put all the meat on the bones, and we retoned it a couple of times. There was one point where the game was a little kind of tongue-in-cheek and funny, and as we evolved the gameplay and realized that we're making kind of a harsh and difficult game that is mean to you sometimes, that like tongue-in-cheek cracking jokes while you're kind of like, my guys keep dying, didn't quite fit. So we brought it down to earth, made it a little darker, a little more grim in order to match the story to the gameplay we were telling.
So walk us through sort of a normal day for you and what you would sort of do during the process in this game.
So usually the day starts for me whenever I show up to work and drive across the Golden Gate Bridge and get up here, and I complain about traffic for a little while and drink some coffee, and usually I check in with everybody on the team, see how things are going, review the work in the game. What happens on a day-to-day basis really excuse me, depends on where we are in the development of the game. At the beginning of the game, it's a lot of just brainstorming and throwing ideas around and figuring out what we want to do exactly and kind of nailing down the beat sheets and exactly what's going to go on. And then once we move into production, it's a lot of like reviewing work and sitting down and giving feedback to people on the team and going back and forth and kind of hammering it into the shape we want it to be. And then after all of that's done, then we get into voice recording, and in this case, I spent a lot of time at the studio in Los Angeles, recording the 25,000 some audio lines we have for this game. So that cycle takes a long time, and then you get into the process of just when you're trying to finish off the game, taking out what really doesn't work is the time you start editing that stuff out, and then just beating as many bugs out before it gets out of the door as you possibly can, and trying to polish it into the best game it possibly can be.
And what do you use as an influence for some of the story elements?
There are a couple of main things that I keep going back to that were influential on this game. One is we looked at the right stuff, like from the Earth to the Moon. For me, it was specifically the right stuff because it's a little older. But looking at the things that, like the scientific pioneers of the day, particularly the Mercury and Gemini era, were almost kind of modern mad scientists in a way, because they just taking rockets and strapping them to things, and like it all made sense. They had a plan. They weren't just strapping stuff to other stuff. But from a modern perspective, like the technology they were working with and how they were working is really kind of crazy. And I wanted to get that sense of like, because it was a national mission for them and something that had to be done in a sense of duty, I wanted to take that combined with the aesthetics of all the crazy stuff they were doing, and get that feel of almost desperation, because the people in XCOM in the base, they have to get this stuff going. They have to, figure out how to make this alien gun work for us so we can fight back, and they're just constantly pushing forward and getting stuff out untested, and that the kind of rolling chaos ball that goes forward as they're trying to win this war. And then tonally, for the story of Carter himself and our main story, there's a movie from the 70s that I went back to a lot, called The Conversation with Gene Hackman by Francis Ford Coppola. It's about a guy who, he's a very secretive guy, keeps to himself, and he learns some things that he shouldn't know, and he kind of realizes that they're not quite what he understood them to be, but in the process pretty much pulls himself apart and wrecks his life. But tonally, it's got this really cool, down-to-earth, kind of tense vibe to it, and I really wanted to go for that feel.
Is there anything you wanted to tell in the story that just didn't fit, or you've had to pull out for whatever reason that you really wanted to put in?
I mean, there's a lot of stuff that you end up pulling out, because you start off with all of these great ideas, and then you go forward and you realize, this part with the hot air balloon doesn't really fit. There wasn't a hot air balloon at any point to my knowledge, actually. So I mean, what you leave on the cutting room floor is usually there for a reason, but it's sometimes a matter of the feeling of killing your babies, where it's like, oh, I really like that scene, but we really don't need it.
And you mentioned the voice recording. How much of your time is spent in that process?
In this case, it was about a total of 5 weeks we spent recording. We had 2 studios operating, and just constantly rolling forward, session after session, just getting this stuff in. We worked really hard to make sure we were prepared for those sessions, and that we went in, we spent some extra time working with the actors. Our main actor, who plays Carter, is really, really good, and it was great to have time with him to kind of polish some stuff up. There's one scene in particular where Carter has a scene where he speaks Russian, but the actor didn't speak Russian, so we had somebody who did, just kind of coaching him through it phonetically, and it sounds really cool to just have that moment where, like, yeah, we just could have subtitled it, or just, but the person he's talking to, I thought it was really cool just to have them actually have the conversation in subtitled Russian, and said something about Carter and his past that he's just like, hey, what's up, I speak Russian. So yeah, it can be a lengthy process, but it's worth it. I'm happy with what we got, and it's pretty cool stuff.
So for some of the actors that did the voice work, have we heard of anyone, or is it just a group of...
It's in some cases it's just kind of the usual suspects. You see a lot of people doing game work, because it's actually it's its own little beast, and it's difficult to do for voice actors, and so there are probably about 100 of them working that are really, really good that we get. As far as are there any Hollywood actors or names like that? I don't always really see a lot of value coming from that, because they're people that you slap their name on it, but at the end they're reading the same scripts that everybody else read. It's different from a movie where you get their expressions, or where you can actually get them in it as opposed to just their voice.
That's it for part 1. If you'd like to watch part 2, click on the link on the screen now. And if you'd like to see some exclusive gameplay footage of the first mission, click on the link on the screen as well. And why not subscribe to us for more gameplay footage, exclusive interviews, and lots more by clicking on the subscribe button on the screen now.